So now we're moving down the back and we're going to be on procedure number 14, the Erector Spinae. So basically we're just going to stroke and compress all the way down the Erector Spinae. We know this as 3 muscles. I can never really tell the difference between the spinalis, the iliocostalis, and the longissimus, but I can feel the medial side of the spinalis and I can feel the lateral side of the iliocostalis, and the longissimus is the one in the middle. I might have said that wrong before. Anyway, so our first thing we can do is just start warming up and stroking down the Erector Spinae. So similar to our fascial stroke that we did in the very beginning, but now we're just going to sink down into the depth of the Erector Spinae and just begin to open this muscle up. As we're moving down, explore this muscle. See where you feel where it's like maybe congested. Right down in this lower trapezius area where we have those layers of the lower trapezius, rhomboid, and the Erector Spinae, it usually gets pretty thick feeling to me. And just observe as you're beginning to warm them up. Just observe what you feel and what areas are calling to your attention. So we can do strokes, we can do compressions. Using a broad tool like my palm is going to make the pressure feel very broad and dispersed. But I can get a little bit more specific if I find an area that I want to work on, and I can use fingers. So if I kind of roll back and forth, you can feel little lines of tension. So I can get more specific by using a more specific tool, relaxing my shoulders, bending in my trunk, supported fingers. Usually my rule of thumb is the leg that's behind me is the same arm that I'm working, so it just travels up this way, up the back and out my arm, versus if I was the opposite, then it would go up my leg, across my back and out my arm. So I usually keep the leg behind me of the arm that's working. Try that first. If that feels totally uncomfortable, that's okay, just switch it up, but just make sure your dantian is in line, your shifting of your weight, and your trunk is tucked and all that stuff. So it's very easy to do our stroke. If we find a spot of resistance, I can either move through it, try to skim off the surface, or I can go into a compression. When I go into compression, I'm going to use my forearm, find that area, and my intention here is to make space between each of the vertebrae. So I have to sink down into the Erector Spinae and let it create a little pocket for my forearm. And if I want to make space between the vertebrae, my vector is going to go down to elongate that muscle. My foot isn't past my work, so as I shift my weight into my work. And this is a very long muscle. You could spend a lot of time here if you wanted to, because it's very long and it's very thick. So I can spend a whole bunch of time just doing compressions, and I can do a compression in the top of the muscle. I can do compressions into the lateral side of the muscle, the medial side of the muscle. So let me just show you what that would look like if you wanted to do that. If I was coming to the medial side of the muscle, the lateral side, I'm just kind of roll off a little bit, but I'm still on that lateral side of the muscle. Sink into it, that edge, and then vector and pull that down. This is just helping us get very, very specific and making your massage specific for your client's needs, not just a routine massage. And I just saw a little contraction in Elijah's muscle, which I consider a release, a little spasm. And then I'm going to slowly come out. So if I also wanted to go onto this medial side of the spinalis, now I'm going to kind of pull the muscle away slightly, get a hold of that medial side of the muscle. This usually feels pretty good. It's really specific. So I'm kind of pulling it away, sinking down, and then vectoring. Pull away, sink down, and vector. And I can do these series of compressions down the whole entire muscle if I wanted to, starting at the top and going down to the bottom. I can just do strokes. I can do it in piecework. It's totally up to you. These are different options. The stroke with the palm, stroke with supported fingers to get more specific, or to get very specific, compressions. So if I'm going to do a stroke, sometimes I like to do a stroke out the lateral side as well. So I get into that lateral edge of the iliacostalis. Before I was right on top, now I'm on that lateral edge. And I can also do one on the medial edge. And we would just take this stroke all the way down again. Unless we found something along the way, I can pass it and come back to it. Or if I found a little adhesion along the way, I can also stop and do a compression right then and there. Up to you. Get creative. Just get lost in their muscle and follow it down the whole way to the sacrum. Sometimes if your fingers get a little tired, I can switch them up. I'll just put the other finger behind. Make sure my weight's back into my back foot. And I can switch fingers. So I'm doing the same stroke, just using a different tool, making sure my shoulder's relaxed. I can also use supported thumbs. So I have multiple ways to do my strokes within the same stroke, multiple tools. And then we'll just follow it through. So that's the Erector Spinae. So the next one would be considered the intervertebrals. Let me finish this. I'm going to finish the stroke as I speak. The intervertebrals are also sometimes called the deep spinal muscles. They are located between spinous process and transverse process. So in this laminar groove, which is medial to the spine and just lateral to the erector spinae, and this little gully in between. So we're going to be working very, very close to the spine, which makes a lot of sometimes therapists a little apprehensive because everybody's talking about careful of the spine, careful of the spine. We're working not on the spine, but we're using the spine as our guide. So to warm this up, just let your palm fall right off the spine into that laminar groove, into that little gully between the spine and the erector spinae, and just open up that gully a little bit. Just push it away. Warm it up a little bit. Feels pretty nice. I like to do this work a lot on people because it's so specific. It's so close to the vertebrae, and I'm really making space between each of the vertebrae. And what I know about in between each vertebrae is that's where all of the nerves come out. And if those nerves from their core have a nice space to come out, that's what's going to innervate everything else past that intervertebral muscle. So just opening it up. If you want to get a little bit more specific to where you're going to work, you can use thumbs. So I'm on the vertebrae. I'm just going to roll right off. And then I'm going to push into that erector spinae, the spinalis part of the erector spinae. And I'm just going to work myself up. I would normally start all the way at the very bottom at the SI joint and work all the way up. But for time's sake, I'm just going to show you in the middle of the back so you can see what I'm doing. So this is just my way of getting more confident and comfortable working next to the spine, as well as warming up for a stroke. So I just shift my weight down, and then I push, vector my way in to the erector spinae. This usually is a stroke that people are very surprised, even if they've had massage lots of times, this usually doesn't get done, and this feels really nice. It's very, very effective. So, once you've gotten yourself a little bit more comfortable working in that laminar groove, you can add a stroke. There are 5 actual muscles here. The one that you're going to hear about the most is the multifidus. Most people have heard of that muscle before. So now I'm working in a smaller area, so I have to use a smaller tool, so I'm using the sides of my fingers, just like my stroke that I did down the erector spinae. And And I can also use my thumbs. So slowly melting that fascia. And even as I go down this little space, I will find lines of adhesions or lines of tension and adhesions. And I can stop into those spaces and do a compression as well. He's moving pretty good. My weight has been shifted to my front foot, so I'm going to take a little step forward, shift my weight to my back foot so I can continue my stroke. I'm always rechecking my body mechanics. So we got a little tight spot here. So I'm going to come back over and get a little bit more specific with my thumbs and maybe just make small little circles and open up that spot a little bit. Use your intuition. If something's calling to you, listen and go investigate. That's what we're here for. And then I can continue with my stroke. And just like before, I can change fingers if I need to. Sometimes I even work across the body, especially as I get lower, and that allows me to move down to the side of the table. So I move side to side across the table if I need to. And I'm just going to slowly move down and try to tell you what I feel. He's melting very, very nicely, so I'm not having to, I don't have any speed bumps along the way. There's times that it feels a little thicker where I feel a little congested, and it just kind of slows down my stroke a little bit. So that's where I just kind of readjust my body mechanics and hold that space until the fascia slowly lets me on through. And then I'm going to go all the way down to the sacroiliac joint where the sacrum and the ilium meet. And usually here is when I switch into a thumb, because I like to end in a compression, which brings me into the very next procedure, the beginning of my QL. So, my QL, a series of compressions just superior to the iliac crest, starting near the lumbar sacral joint. So where the lumbar and the sacrum come together, and then where the sacrum and the ilium come together. That little cul-de-sac right at the bottom. So I'm at the very bottom of my laminar groove. If I finish the intervertebrals with a stroke, it takes me right into this exact space that I want to start my compression. So with like any compression, I don't want to push into the bone. I want to feel the bone. I want to feel the bone, back up from the bone, sink down, and then vector underneath the bone. I don't want to push straight into the bone. So back up, sink, and vector under. I can use a supported thumb, or I can use an elbow. So if I'm going to use an elbow, now I'm going to get a little bit more specific and use the actual elbow because it's a very small area. So I'm going to feel the vertebrae on this side, the sacrum down below here, and then up against my elbow on the other side, I'm going to feel the erector spinae, like a little tiny pocket. And then here I feel the bone, so I'm going to back up from the bone. I'm going to slowly sink, relaxed elbow, relaxed wrist, relaxed fingers. Try to come in without resistance. And then now that I've sunk, I'm going to vector. So the quadratus lumborum, this is kind of a twofold. The quadratus lumborum grabs onto the top of the iliac crest, so I'm getting where it hangs on tight, but I'm also getting the last intervertebral. And you can just do a series of compressions all along the iliac crest. I like to do at least 3. So I'm going to do this one as 1, and I'm going to slowly come on out to my second one. I'm going to just roll right on top of that erector spinae and do one right on top of the erector spinae, again feeling the bone first of the sacrum, backing up, sinking into the muscle, and then vectoring to kind of imagine going underneath that iliac crest to stretch that muscle. Relax, relax, relax. If I have a stiff fist, he will feel it. That fascia will resist against me. So resistance causes resistance. Relax. It's all good. And then slowly come out. And then my last compression is going to be on that lateral side of the erector spinae. And I like to kind of get a hold of that lateral side of the erector spinae and then vector down towards it. So scooting yourself out, tucking your trunk, feeling the lateral side of the erector spinae getting into the muscle, kind of like we did with pec major. And then vectoring down towards the iliac crest. So this is the first part of our procedure for the quadratus lumborum. We're trying to release the ilium from the lumbar vertebrae, making space right here, but it also goes all the way up to the 12th rib. So we're going to do some compressions right into the belly of the muscle. So slowly coming out. Now the QL lies deep to the erector spinae. So you need to find that edge of that erector spinae. You need to find the 12th rib, and you need to find that iliac crest. And on Elijah, this is the amount of space between his 12th rib and his iliac crest, which is very, very typical for most people. Doesn't mean they have a tight QL, it just could mean that they have a long torso. So we need to work underneath that erector spinae into that QL, into the belly of the muscle. So when I pull it apart, you can see it kind of makes like a little bit of a wall. I want to work it down into the center of that wall. So I have to come down. And I'm going to do is 3 compressions. One straight into the belly of the muscle, one at a diagonal towards the sacroiliac joint, and one up at a diagonal towards where the 12th rib meets the lumbar vertebrae. Supported thumbs, I'm just going to go straight in. This muscle does lateral flexion as well as elevation of the hip. So sometimes I ask for movement to make sure I'm in the right spot. So this is a very hidden muscle. It's not used to visitors. So we have to approach peacefully. Don't come in jabbing. Work with breath. Take a good 3 breaths to go in. You can really hurt somebody if you go in too hard and too fast. And once you feel like, it feels like kind of like a wall of muscle. So once you feel it, you can ask them to do a little side bend for you. Do you mind bending towards my thumbs? A little side bend. Bringing your shoulder down a little bit. There we go, thank you. And you might have even seen my thumbs come out when he did that, so then I know I'm on it. So I continue with my compression. So this will be my first compression, straight in. And I make small little circles. So, working the QL. I'm trying to make space between the lumbar vertebrae and the ilium, as well as the 12th rib and the ilium. So that's directly in the muscle. Sometimes once I find the muscle, I don't want to lose it, so I just come out slightly, change my vector for my second compression, and then slowly sink in again. Supported thumbs. Is this a good spot at all? Yeah. Don't be afraid to talk to your clients. You know, sometimes you can be really close to the right spot, but you're just not quite there. And a lot of times they'll talk to you about pressure. They'll ask for just a little bit more pressure. And remember that it's not that we need to work harder and add more pressure, because when we find the right spot, it will feel like a lot of pressure. So when they're asking for more pressure, think location. Maybe search a little bit in that area you're working. You can be right next to that adhesion and just not quite on it. And as soon as you hit it, they're going to tell you that the pressure went up, but it's no harder on you. It's just that you found the right spot. So remember, deep tissue is really about being intricate with your work, not so much about having to do deep pressure. And now I'm changing my body to vector up for my last compression, up towards that rib cage. I'm sorry, not really up towards the rib cage, up towards the vertebrae. The rib is like this, and I'm going in that little corner where the 12th rib meets the vertebrae, meets T7, T12. How's that spot right there, Leish? So I found a little nugget, so I went right into the center of the nugget. Another word for nugget is an adhesion. And and then we'll slowly come out. Just a quick little tip. A lot of the times when I'm getting somebody on the table, when they lay down, one of the things that I'll do is I'll make sure that they're laying straight, because sometimes they might lay laying off to the side. And if they're laying off to the side, it means that QL is tight, and it's just that they feel like this is straight. So when I straighten them out, they won't even know that that is straight. And another way to tell what QL is tighter than the other, his is pretty even, but if one QL is tight, there'll be more of a C curvature in this lower back. So that's the QLs. So Erector Spinae Intervertebral, take us down to the compressions in the QL at the origin and right into the belly of the muscle. Next, we're moving on into the glutes.